And how do you see environmental conditions such as like pollution, displacement of biodiversity, or the threat of climate disaster showing up in people's mental health?
Sure. So, number one, uh, the psychological effects, the reason why it has not been amplified is because it's most of the time is usually subconscious. Most of the people are unconscious about what is actually happening and the reason why they have the psychological stress. Let me call it the ecological trauma or the environmental anxiety. So the way I see pollution in itself, number one, it brings discomfort. That's the first response that a person gets. That's the first cognitive, the one that is conscious about. Like, why is there a lot of smoke in this area? I don't feel comfortable breathing. So that's number one. Number two, we have very bad smell, and we have noise pollution that may come from industrial activities in the area. So what does it do to the mind? So subconsciously, consciously you become irritated, but subconsciously it adds on to your stress, and you feel as if your space starts cramping up. But normally you won't notice because, as I said, it's subconscious. So the psychological part of it, we should stop now treating this anxiety and psychological effects as a diagnosis only, because before we start saying that it is because try to cope up with the environmental waste, the air pollution, that you need to understand, you need to cope up with it, because uh, that's how you can avoid, but you cannot avoid something that actually is the root cause of something. So instead of saying how can people cope up with the environmental degradation, you should start encouraging why is it there in the first place. So that's something that I've really noticed. And what I can say about the environment, place where you live in, because your mental health starts with a place where you live in, because your mind it exists in the unseen. Well, let me call it unseen, because you physically exist, but you emotionally feel what happens around you, and mentally think about what is actually happening around you, either consciously or subconsciously. So what I can say, there's a big difference when you go to the city and when you go to the place where there is a lot of trees. Let me not call it rural, because we also have trees and very good places in the cities. Let me call it a place where it has been degraded and a place that has been maintained or protected as far as the trees are concerned and the nature in itself. So when you wake up in in morning, what is the first thing you usually hear? The first thing is in a very environmentally conserved area. The first thing you hear is birds chirping. You can breathe in the good natural air, and what it does, it reduces your stress by a very great percentage, because number one, you feel as if your space isn't cramped. That what I mentioned earlier in the subconscious space. And also the second thing is that the chirping of birds is musical. It has an healing aspect of it, because a study shows that the chirping of birds and natural sounds from animals, they they do better as far as your mental aspect is concerned than even musical healing, which is something that I was surprised. So, but when you wake up, the first thing in the city, either you hear the horning of cars or the loud music, be it even no, number one, you'll notice there are no birds, because number one, and number two, birds love places that are natural in nature, because that's why they are not in places where it's only high rises and buildings. So the only way we can, as I talked earlier about the biolife, we can even have the animals, because the animals, they are also thinking either subconsciously or consciously. So their mental health also matters, because that is how they are able to live. As you mentioned earlier, people dying of depression. See, mental health is also related to how somebody lives and how somebody carries on their daily businesses. So if we don't try to curb those negative effects of climate change that are later leading on to mental health decline, it also leads to increased rates of death due to mental challenges, and also depression, anxiety, be it trauma. Yes, so that's what I can say for now about the environmental degradation, which is having a really heavy toll, and it has to be addressed early before it gets to big before it gets to greater masses and greater numbers of people affected that we cannot control.